Jake Von Slot, thank you very much for
Hi,
being
Chris.
here.
Thank you.
All right, so first of all, let's find out about what steampunk is.
Well, in the 1980s, there were a bunch of science fiction writers that are writing stories about the advent of the information age and about the internet and personal computers.
Right.
And this genre of science fiction was called cyberpunk. And some of these authors realized that there were a lot of parallels with the information age and the Industrial Revolution.
Ah, right.
The sort of the man-machine changing society.
But without children working in factories.
At least not in this country.
No, not in this country.
So they started writing stories that sort of blended those themes and did things like create alternative histories where the information age and the Industrial Revolution happened at the same time.
So it's really kind of like an anachronistic aesthetic that came about, kind of almost like a Terry Gilliam Brazil sort of a look.
Exactly. In stories, there are all of these fantastic electromechanical computing devices and
Analog stuff, running really high-tech stuff.
yeah, lots of brass and clockwork.
Yeah.
And I love that stuff, and I wanted to make some of it real. So that's sort of how I got started.
Were you always kind of I like to play around with old stuff and put it on?
Yeah, my mother will tell you the story about how I tapped the telephone when I was 6 years old.
Oh.
Yeah, so I've always been a tinkerer, and I always love to take other people's discards and mix them up and turn them into useful things again.
Excellent. Like first example is this. This is just basically just a Fender Strat, pretty basic guitar that you found, but you've done some really cool etching on the pick guard. So how did you do that?
It looked like all the other guitars of this type. I had the standard mother of pearl pick guard, and I wanted
Boring.
something. Yeah. So I wanted something a little bit different. So I had this idea that I could make it look like there was clockwork inside the guitar. So I drew the image, and I used a process that's usually used for making electronic printed circuit boards to put the image on the brass, and then I etched it using a 19th century technique where you use electricity and copper sulfate or blue vitriol.
Oh, that's great. Well, that actually makes it more authentic too, because using that process. All right. So with that etching process, you've done an image on the back of this iPod.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about this image?
Well, this is the Lady Ada Byron, Countess of Lovelace, and she's often considered to be the first computer programmer. She wrote a series of instructions for, I believe it was doing Fourier transforms.
Was it the difference engine?
Yes, Charles Babbage's difference engine.
Yeah.
Which is there's a reproduction of it in the London Museum of Science.
Well, this is a fitting tribute to have her image on the back of a super high-tech iPod.
I think it is.
Well, let's move on a little bit. So I assume that you did not buy this Dell flat screen right out of the box. What inspired this piece?
Well, it came out, typical gray plastic, and the world is full of gray plastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things I like to do in all the pieces is incorporate something that's actually an antique.
Right.
So I had purchased these. These are gas lamp arms. They would normally attach to the wall, and the gas lamp would attach to this end. They'd hold it away from the wall. So
back in caveman times when they used gas lamps.
Yeah, well, it would keep the wallpaper from catching fire.
Yeah.
So I bought these online, and I was unwrapping them at my desk at work, and I pulled them out of the box, and they just seemed to naturally go on either side of my monitor.
That's fantastic. I mean, and what I like about it is it actually, they move and squeak, and so that makes it really, it gives it the rickety but
Mechanical.
Yeah, exactly, completely mechanical feel. I mean, do you feel that a lot of art inspires science to then go forward and produce technology?
And vice versa, I think. I think I take some of my inspiration, if you will, my artistic information from the science. So I think they go hand in hand.
This is my favorite piece, by the way. The keyboard is stunning. Did these come from like an Underwood typewriter, an old?
The black keys are from an old Royal, and the white keys are from a Smith Corona.
Fantastic. Well, why don't you, since we're on the topic of the keyboard, you can actually show us how to make this in our own homes. So how'd you go about that?
Okay. Well, the first step is to actually remove a key from the keyboard. So the keys pop off fairly easily with a screwdriver. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to cut off the skirt that's around the outside of the key.
That sounds sexy.
So let's put on our safety goggles.
All right.
It's not steampunk if there aren't goggles involved.
Absolutely. I feel like I should have like an overcoat and leather gloves too.
That would be
Do you work with that? And a satchel? All right, let's see.
Okay, so now we're going to do this I'll just cut one side so you can see what we'll be doing. So repeat that 4 times, and what you'll end up with is a piece that looks like that.
Terrific.
Once you removed this part of it. So once we have this piece, we need to cut it into a round circle. I should show you this. This is a typewriter key from a Smith Corona typewriter. And
you can just get that on any...
You can get them online on auction sites. Crafters use them for making jewelry and such. So they're quite easy to find. The back, you can see there are 3 little metal tabs. And if you bend those metal tabs back, you'll be able to disassemble the key entirely. And you'll come up with a chrome trim piece.
All right.
The letter. And the glass cover.
All right.
So I use the glass cover as a template and continue to use the Dremel tool to make the top of the key round. And then it's a fairly simple matter to assemble the letter.
By the way, don't use a Dremel tool if you're stressed out. You will take off every finger on your hand.
Once we've assembled the components of the key, I'll simply bend these tabs back over the plastic base.
Right onto their new home.
And number 3. And we will have our assembled key, which we can slip right back into the keyboard.
How long does it take approximately, per key? That only took a few seconds, right?
Yeah, you saw that, and after you do 102 of them, you get very adept.
All right, so it's not something you could do in an hour, but if you had an afternoon or 2 days, maybe you could completely modify your keyboard. Now, just what about this grating on the side?
That's cut from 1/4-inch brass stock, and I used standard power drill. I did cut it with a bandsaw, and it was finished with sandpaper and files and a lot of elbow grease. I wanted to make Captain Nemo's computer.
Yeah, honestly, if Jules Verne had a computer, this would have been his computer. Inside You beats the heart of an artist, Jake. It is really a pleasure to meet you.
Thank
and
you,
this stuff is great. Please make sure and visit Jake's website, which is steampunkworkshop.com. None of this stuff is for sale. It's purely just for
it's my hobby.
It's eye candy.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. Jake, thank you so much for being here. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you,
This
Chris.
is incredible.